Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, welcome to today's Charity Village webinar. We're going to get started in just a moment. We're just letting everyone get on the line here. We're expecting fairly high numbers today, so we want to be sure that everyone has a chance to join from across the country. And it looks like we've got most everyone here. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So hello, I'd like to welcome all of you that are just joining to today's Charity Village webinar. My name is Marina Dawson and I'm the Manager of Community and Content with Charity Village. And I wanted to thank you all for joining us today. We do have a...
Thank you so much. That is fantastic. And welcome everybody online. I'm so pleased to be able to be here to be able to present a way of looking at strategic planning. So we've called this session Strategic Planning Done Right. And hopefully by the end of this session, we will be able to share just a deeper view of what the concepts and some of the common methodologies, also known as frameworks, or AKA the template. But also together, we will explore how this aligns to how we actually work in real life. So without further ado, we just want to be able to make sure that strategic planning, and more than just a strategic plan, is going to be able to achieve a guide for your organization's success. So just to start, how did I get here? Who am I? Why am I actually doing this presentation on strategic planning? And I would say that from the most part, I have been a fan of strategic planning, entrepreneurship, seeing the bigger picture from basically childhood. My childhood was very much around being able to help others, to be able to see an objective and visionary view of their future. And I think that that really started where I wanted to go with a career. From a career point of view, I started a company, a web application company, and after about 7 years, I sold it. And then after doing that, I went and took an MBA, which was a very interesting approach to understanding how the MBA could really help me and help others. Currently, I'm a management consulting assisting in strategic development, risk management, performance management, as well as procurement type work. Working for BDO Consulting, which also does accounting and audit and other advisory type practices. And so, most certainly my career has always been around wanting to do good. And I think that sharing what I know and what I've experienced about how to do strategic planning can be definitely an extension of how we can do good for all. So today's session, I just want to be able to share with you three large, just key concepts, and to be able to make sure that they're clear, they're concise, and that at the end of this, that you will be able to share this knowledge and hopefully implement some of these concepts in your organization. As well, there's kind of some sidebar benefits today. I want you to have some fun. So we want to be able to, understand some fuzzy language that I see quite often in strategic plans. Understand what a real measure is. So we'll go through some of those and just to kind of hopefully have some things that we can share with each other around that. And the last thing is to understand what an actual outcome is. I created this presentation for Charity Village to really surface how to effectively execute on strategic planning. I recognize that this is a heavily loaded sentence, effectively execute. So I'll add a couple of caveats. There are for certain poor ways to do strategic planning, and there are good ways to do strategic planning. There's no one correct way for your organization because your people, your stakeholders, your organization will be different than others participating today. So I really encourage you to try and use this information and see how it would work within your organization. So with that said, I think a great outcome today would be if everyone can say, and I'm going to air quote it, understand the frameworks that I present and feel pretty confident that you should should you wish to use them with your organization, that you could lead that discussion. So as a person that is interested in developing a strategic plan or contributing to a plan within your organization, I want you to be able to understand how to create the plan. So that's number one here. How to use a logical framework to be able to base your activities towards that plan. So that's number two there. And then how to measure results. So how to measure those outcomes. During and at the end of this session, it'd be great to get your comments and your feedback. I want to make sure that there's no kind of questions that aren't heard, if there's any confusion. Hopefully, we'll be able to encourage you to participate. We have 2 polls today. They're both fun, so don't worry. There's no kind of big having to have some background knowledge for them. So I really hope that you participate in the 2 polls. And at the end of this presentation, there's going to be a template. And that template is for you to leverage in your organization to be able to better understand how you can do strategic planning done right. So, strategic plan. So for many organizations, this is a great quote here from Harvard Business Review. For many organizations, it is either an over-explained budget or just costume theater. So with that, I would like, we could do a poll right off the bat. And I was wondering if we can just start us off by thinking a bit about your strategic plan in your organization. So let me know if you feel your organization has a clear and effective strategic plan. So I'll leave that open, and I'm going to continue talking while you share your thoughts on that. So for many of you working in a nonprofit, you know, certainly this statement about being an over-explained budget might be pretty true to you. The inability to create a strategic plan that has objectives that are not for-profit type objectives sometimes seems to be a little bit more difficult. And it's not only the plan that's tough to create, it's getting the right level of guidance to be relevant and have it really interact with the activities that you're doing in your organization. How are we doing on our poll?
It's going great here. I'm going to close and share the results now with everyone. So as you can see, we have 24%, actually we have an even split, 24% on yes, 100% of our plan is clear and guides my work, and no, have not seen a plan in years. But by far the majority, 40%, it's not bad, but I don't really use it for my work. Only 12% say every year is the same and we're not closer to our mission. Are those the numbers you expected,
Okay.
Ashley?
You know what, numbers can be every organization is different. And I'm going to share a little bit of a story based on what you've just said there that I think is really interesting. I just a couple months ago was invited to do a facilitated day-long workshop with nonprofits and municipal governments. The session was supposed to be on performance management. So I assumed that each and every one of them would have a strategic plan. I asked them to bring their strategic plan and to review it before so that we didn't, you know, have to spend time reading each plan. And within the first 15 minutes of my 7-hour workshop, there was a global realization that not one of the participants had a strategic plan that we would be able to leverage to get the most out of the workshop for performance management. And that did surprise me, that not one of the strategic plans had a clear kind of pathway or guidance towards what are the activities that we're supposed to do and how would we measure them. So that's really kind of created the interesting feedback around maybe we need to refresh our memory around how to do strategic plans that are able to guide our organization towards success. There we go.
Great.
So thank you everybody for participating and think about how we would want to be able to for those of you that said that it doesn't seem to guide our activities, really start to think about, well, what is it that's missing? And maybe try and think about what in this presentation that would help your strategic plan get a little bit more aligned with your activities? And for those people that said, no, we don't have one, you know, certainly this will be a step towards being able to create one that will guide your activities. So we need to kind of get the white elephant out of the room, or pink or polka dotted elephant out of the room. Strategies, strategic. I think basically the most overused word probably in business, certainly an overused word in government. So basically I wanted to just start by clearing how we're going to use this word in this session. Strategy is for all, so profit, nonprofit, government, it doesn't matter. We all use these words, but I think that we use them in different ways. So for this session, we're going to mean that strategy is the high level. It is the guidance, not the control, and it's published. So it's a strategy. It's at the top level, very much understanding the bigger vision. Strategies, those are activities and projects that are a result of the strategy. So for this session, we're thinking strategies, when we're talking about, oh, we've got strategies, they're kind of a grouping of activities that guide towards the bigger vision. And then strategic, quite literally the most overused word probably, is the thinking that you need to apply. It's that concept of having multiple views. It's the concept of leveraging thoughtfulness around options and a long-term view. I have worked in the government setting, and I have joked that, you know, they have bought the word strategy or strategic, and they bought it under an unlimited use policy, and they're going to get their money's worth. It seems that everywhere you look, there's a strategic plan. Here's some strategies. This is a strategic paper. Here's a strategic action. So we want to make sure that we're actually using these words to be very much in alignment with how we need them today. And we're trying to come up with a strategic plan. I love this this picture that I've used on many different workshops. It's very much around this for strategic, is if you can do it consistently, it's clear, you can have the right combination of activities, you will be able to be successful. Without having thought through the strategic plan, how this would be appropriate for your organization, it is quite consistently not going to be as effective. So to basically get from vision to result, we need to be able to look at, I think that we need to be able to look at the end. And specifically the end in this conversation is around what is the strategic plan? And it's the strategic plan that's going to guide you through your activities. So it needs to be written in a way that is actually helpful for your activities, translated in a way that is right for your reality. So to understand how the strategic plan and the planning process works, the best way to review this is by looking at the finished product of the plan. If we look at this, this elusive plan, so for some of you, maybe there isn't a plan out there apparently, the strategic plan should have some objectives or goals and some measures to measure those objectives or goals. Oftentimes, plans start with a contextual piece, kind of referencing why the organization exists and how the organization will create a better future for themselves and their target audience. In my experience in this field, many organizations are pretty confident that they have given reasonable thought towards their plan, but they think that the failure in the plan is actually more about not having enough people or resources, rather than the plan itself not providing the necessary guidance. This session is to help you make sure that you do provide the necessary guidance through actually a little bit more thought on a couple of the different elements that I'll share with you today. So we all have a great vision, and certainly for the nonprofit sector, it is fantastic because it's a deeply passionate vision. And we have, so for this presentation, I wanted to say, let's just use something very easy. We have, for instance, a vision of running a marathon in less than 4 hours, or I have a vision of running a marathon in less than 4 hours. In order for me to do that, it's quite obvious I'm going to have to run a few marathons. But unless you're already a fantastic athlete, the reality is I'm going to have to start with a much, much smaller goal. I'm going to have to start off with a short-term plan. And that short-term plan might be the next 6 months. And then I'm going to need to apply kind of some type of structure and time, so resources, in order to be able to test that goal and measure that goal. And then with that, with a little bit of rinse repeat, we will be able to progress to the bigger ones and the harder goals. And one step at a time, we will be able to achieve the desired results. So the strategic plan, and I'm sure all of you are aware, the core elements of a strategic plan certainly start with a vision. I'm going to do a little bit more focus on this concept of the target audience, because they are the ones that you're actually doing things for. So these things should be very much in line with that. It doesn't matter if you're nonprofit or if you're a private sector. There is a result that you're creating for other people. We want to make sure that we do an external analysis. So this is very much better understanding, external and internal, better understanding what we call a SWOT analysis, as well as better understanding what that external environment is, and that's often called a pest analysis, and we'll get into that in the next couple of slides. From that, we should be able to figure out some top priorities. We should be able to figure out what are the most important things for us to do in the next 1 to 5 years. And then this is that concept of the logical framework. And by the end of this presentation, we will be able to walk through this, hopefully canter through it, each and every one of you, and understand what the
Hi there. I think we may have just lost audio on Ashley. So if you don't mind bearing... Oh, Ashley, you're back?
Yeah.
I think you cut out for just a moment. Yeah, do you mind just backing up a little bit?
Sure, no problem. Sorry about that.
No problem.
The phone started talking to me. So, you know, by the time that we get to the end of this presentation, I hope that everybody will have the ability to kind of go forwards on a logical framework or backwards on a logical framework and feel very confident that it is understandable of how we're going to achieve our long-term objectives. Well, I don't know if I have ability to click. Let's see here, show on screen. Oh, there we go, sorry. So to start off, we're gonna start off with mission, vision and mission and values. I feel like the most important element of a strategic plan is very much understanding, obviously, what the future looks like. So the vision is very much of where or what the future will look like for you. There's a lot of very famous nonprofit vision statements out there. This is one of them that I like a lot for Alzheimer's is a world without. And so it's very clear what the future looks like. You know when you've done this, is that we don't have a world with Alzheimer's. We're not managing it. We're not supporting it. We are having a world without it. Mission statements really talk about who you are and how you do things. So this really kind of leverages a lot of your values in a statement that kind of excites and enthuses in an enthusiastic way, shows you what you're all about. So in this case, we're looking at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. They want to inspire conservation of the ocean. There's a lot of fantastic vision statements out there that you've probably experienced, but I think the most important thing is to have it understandable, short, so that it's memorable, and to have it demonstrate the passion that you have for the organization and the results that you're going to achieve. The other very important element of the vision is to better understand and to articulate values. these values are things that you will always do regardless. It's what you base how you operate. So for instance, you'll see words like fairness, honesty, excellence, professionalism, community. These are the things that you're basing how you're going to be able to run the organization. Just a couple of different examples of other vision statements, just to give you a better idea, is like, for instance, for the Organization for Feeding America, a hunger-free America. So again, we see an end result there. We can all see what that result looks like. And I think that's very important. The next element that we talked about in our framework is this concept of the audience. So the entire reason you exist as a nonprofit or as profit or any organization is to make individuals or groups of individuals' worlds better in some way. And it could also mean in conservation or natural resources, or as being your audience. Your organization has identified some gap in services or supports for which you exist. So this is you, that you exist in this space where you're going to do some help. It is most important element of the strategic plan and the planning concept to come back to the focus of who that end customer, client, individual entity is. And I think the best way to be able to do this sometimes is to be able to create a persona, including a story of who they are. Knowing your audience will make it the process so much more clear. Visualizing who you're trying to help and what they have, what they need, is so much easier to be able to articulate how you're helping them. So once you clearly can see, and maybe perhaps you role play and describe your audience for one or more people, you want to be able to start to look at what is it that they need. So for instance, maybe perhaps the person needs to go, their desire is to go fishing. So what they don't need, and I see this a lot in strategic plans, is something like, oh, they need an online form to fill out to go get their fishing license. What they actually need is the outcome, and the outcome is they get to go fishing. So as an example, we want to make sure that we don't misrepresent what the audience needs with what we're going to do to satisfy that need. So for instance, in that scenario, we might leverage online electronic form as a way of satisfying that need. But we want to make sure that we always articulate the difference between what the end result is for our individual that we're interested in and what we do to enable that end result. And to kind of put some clarity around that, key difference between those two is that the need might stay the same over time, but the way that we help them might be different. So we want to make sure that those two things are separated. So for instance, our need to be able to send a message from one person to another, maybe back in the mid-19th century was mail, and then courier, and now we have email and text. So the need is still the same. However, the method for which we're satisfying that need has changed. The next area in the framework is to then start, so now you've looked at your audience, now to look at the external and internal operations. So I'm not going to go too far into the SWOT analysis because I think that many people have an understanding of what goes in, strengths for organization, weaknesses for the organization. But when we look at the external areas, the opportunities and threats, it is sometimes easier to start to look at it from different lenses. And those lenses are typically, what's the political environment that we're working within? Are there any changes in regulations or policies or legislation that will impact us in a positive way or maybe a negative way? Economic factors. Some organizations need to look at currency, some need to look at jobs. So how does the economic factors of your environment impacting your organization in a positive or negative way. Same with social factors, demographic factors, change in demographics. Again, have a view through opportunities and threats of how that impacts your organization. And then lastly, what is the technological factors? So how is technology changing the environment? If you do a little bit of research on the pest analysis, you will also see that there's extensions to this framework, which can include, for instance, cultural or legal. So it all depends on how deep you want to get into that analysis. But basically, this information that you have here will enable you to be able to better understand where you should focus your energies, which is the next section. Certainly, we need to prioritize, and oftentimes we need to prioritize our priorities. I find it very difficult, and I have seen this quite a few times before, where organizations have so many priorities and so many goals underneath those priorities, but it's very difficult for them to ever focus their energies. And those are oftentimes the organizations that feel as though they just don't get anywhere. There's just too much going on. It's very difficult to achieve successful results if you're divided in too many areas or your resources are divided against too many different priorities. So I'd like to look at priorities around maybe 4 priorities. Certainly 5 is fine. I've also seen just 3 be very effective. Oftentimes the priorities, I like to look at the values and the mission statement as an indicator of where we might want to message those priorities. So as an example, NASA, they have a mission statement that says drive advances in science, tech and aeronautics, and space exploration, enhance knowledge, education and innovation, and stewardship of the earth. So in that statement within the mission, they could pull from that some priorities. So advances in science, tech, and aeronautics could be a priority. How are we going to do that? There could be another priority around enhancing knowledge, education, innovation. And there could be another priority around stewardship of the earth. So from there, we would be able to line up our different strategies or outcomes lined up to those priorities. Oops, sorry. Measures. Actually, we can go there. So in order for us to better line ourselves up, we need to be able to understand if the things that we've chosen to do in terms of our priorities and how we've messaged how they're going to be an outcome for our target audience, we need to be able to figure out if we're actually doing the right thing. So it's important at the early stages to make sure that we can get some measures, a baseline measure, some measures or proxy measures to be able to start to measure our activities against the results. And I just want to impress upon you to use typical, traditional, commonly used measures. We don't want to use anything that people don't understand or that you're unable to repeat multiple times in the years to be able to see some trending. So, you know, it's much easier to be able to leverage across the world. For instance, I've got a picture from, I think it was from CNN, that if we use, 5 feet 3 inches, across the world, a foot is a foot, or the centimeters are the centimeters. And so it's easy to do comparisons. And it's in those comparisons that generate some performance. Metrics, those are things where you oftentimes put 2 measures together and you leverage the 2 together to show a metric. In this case, we're talking about green space per capita. So you've got a square footage or a square meters, and then you're looking at how many people are in that area. So we can then be able to see if we want to increase green space per capita or decrease. We actually have a number to start from. And the next one being the indicator is indicators are vectors that clearly articulate some version of a change. Now, changes for these indicators are increase, decrease. Now, maintain is a no change. Eliminate is there was something, now there's something not there. And then create might be something where nothing was there before, but we need to create that. So there's a change. And what I mean by a proxy measure is sometimes you'll find that some of your outcomes or your goals, you just can't see one measure that will be able to share with your audience that you're achieving it. So for instance, if we wanted to say that good health is what we're looking for, increasing good health of our population, a proxy measure might be blood pressure. It might be weight. So there might be a number of diabetics in the society. So a proxy measure is one measure which is reflective of good health, for instance, in this case. And then lastly, we want to have some type of prioritized metric that supports outcomes. You will find that there might be dozens of ways to measure something. It's not important to measure everything. What's important is to find the most significant things that really demonstrate achievement and just leverage those. Having a smaller amount of KPIs will be much more helpful in communicating if we need to change our activities or if we're being successful with our activities. So here's another poll question that we have for you. And I just want you to look, before the poll comes up, I want you to look at these 4 rooms. And have a really good look at these 4 rooms. And then I want you to choose the room when the poll comes up, choose the room that enhances your experience. So think about how you would like to be and what would enhance your experience right now. And so I'd like you to choose either A, B, C, or D when the poll comes up.
So Ashley, I've just launched the poll. So everyone, if you want to go ahead and vote on your screen, which room do you think the lighting enhances it the best? So just wait a moment here. Good. Okay, I'm going to share the results here. And it looks like we've got 12% room A, 30% room B, 51% room C, and 6% room D.
Wow, that's awesome.
I'm just going to switch it back here, Ashley, so that folks can go back to your slide there and see as you discuss further. Great.
Thank you. So the main point here, although I'm very interested in the fact that a lot of people chose C, that's great. Apparently nobody wants candlelit rooms right now. Maybe it's midday for you. But the point of this is that the word enhance, so enhance your experience was the question that I asked you. And enhancing the experience was not clear. So in theory, if you're doing a strategic plan with very clear strategies or activities, 100% of your organization should be moving in the same direction. So when we use words like enhance, as you can see, there's room for interpretation. There's room for you to say, okay, well, I think I want a brighter room, or I would like a more focused light in my room. And so part of the strategic planning process is to make sure it's clear to everybody, that it doesn't require added communication or instructions around how to behave, act, and guide your activities. So thank you for sharing that, because, I mean, obviously, it's great that everybody chose something from each one of those rooms. So we're going to have a little short time on fuzzy language. So here's the blue fuzzy language. We won't spend a whole lot of time here, but feel free to look at this slide after. There's a lot of language we see in strategic plans, and I know some of these ones you've seen before. We want to optimize. We want a value-added service. We want to have a win-win. So there's a lot of these types of fuzzy language that at the end of the day, it's really difficult to understand, well, what are we actually doing here? And so if you can, and I know sometimes it just seems better if we can use different words to mean the same thing. In a strategic plan, clarity is the most important thing, and to ensure that your organization is moving in the same direction. So just to share with you some of the good and some of the poor words that we can use for the strategic plan. Here are a couple of examples. So here's better align our ... So within yourself, and I know that I can't hear you, but try and choose between good or poor. So for that one, we're going to put it under poor, because better align doesn't really, I don't know how much better is better. Is that better for you? It's not maybe better for me. And so better doesn't articulate what exactly I'm supposed to do. Improve our position with. You see this a lot in strategic plans. Again, it's not necessarily the clear language that we want to use to be able to guide our behavior. Eliminate cost for. Now think, where would that go? Eliminate. Obviously from that word you can see that there was something and you want nothing. So that is quite clear what the guiding kind of behavior would be there. Decrease operational costs. So this one is clear that we have, we have one number, we want to decrease it. And when we use things like decrease or increase, obviously we can start to now put a target around it. And we can say we want to decrease, or in this case, increase number of widgets by 23%. So it's very clear we have a number before, and then we have a number after. Did we achieve 23%? And then the last one we have here is enhance our partnerships. I see this quite often. I'm not, again, just like our enhance the experience in that room, I'm not sure what enhance means. Does that mean that we're supposed to be doing more partnerships? Does it mean that we're supposed to have more meetings with them? We need to do less. So it's very important that to use words that are quite clear to the entire organization when a result is positive. And positive means you've achieved that objective. So there's a variety of other poor words, and I invite you to look at that fuzzy language slide again after. Other words that I see quite often are streamline, strengthen. Again, it's not as clear as you would like to go. Position, we would like to position ourselves in X, Y, Z. Or leverage. Leverage is used a lot in a strategic plan. Leverage doesn't mean a whole lot when you go to try and measure these things. And now, this is the hard part, and we'll definitely have room for some discussion after, but this is the logical framework that I showed you at the end of that initial slide with the entire methodology. So again, we talked about earlier around the vision and the mission and the values. That basically is the umbrella over top of everything that you should do. And we can start from the right-hand side. And we talked about that there's going to be some long-term strategic outcomes. These are the things that are typically 5 to 10 years down the road. There's still something that you can see and achieve. You're doing them for someone or an individual or for some entity. And you understand that they are going to create a benefit. And that benefit is the end result that you're looking for. The medium term or the intermediate outcome, typically we see those as being between the 2, 3, 5-year time frame. Those are things that you want to be able to line up towards, but they're too aggressive or too difficult for you to be able to achieve in the near term. The short term or direct outcomes, they're often those types of outcomes that have a clear benefit to an individual. They're happening this year. There's something that you want to be able to achieve this year. And those clear direct outcomes together with multiple direct outcomes, create benefits to groups. Now, in order to be able to achieve those direct outcomes, obviously, the organization needs to put some activities together and create outputs. So as an example, just right there, if we pause, an output, activities might be, for instance, creating the online form. An output would be the online form, and this direct short-term outcome would be to be able to, the end customer would be able to get a license. So a medium-term outcome is fishing is to be able to go fishing and have representation or demonstration of their license online. So the outputs and activities directly line up to what that short-term outcome is. For each one of those outcomes, you might have, 4, for instance, priorities. We like to have at least one outcome statement for each of the priorities. And that outcome statement consists of a variety of aspects that you've already done in your analysis stage, which is your target audience. What is it that they need? And what is it that you're going to do for them in the particular areas of that priority? So again, coming back to NASA, if they want to enhance knowledge and education, you would say, we want to enhance it for who, and this is how we're going to do it. The how we're going to do it lines up to the strategies and actions. So you should be able to very much see that these strategies and actions line up to be able to achieve that outcome. We should be able to measure it. So we should be able to use some data, and we should be able to understand that that data really lets us have indicators into, are we being successful or not? Is this doing as much as we thought it should? So that's where it's really good to have a baseline and a target. So when we start a new initiative, we might want to look at what is our baseline, or how many of this thing are we doing now? And we might want to establish a target to say, I think we should be able to increase this by 5. If we don't establish a target, it makes it very difficult for us to be able to know if we're being successful or not, know if we need to modify our activities or not. And then you're going to have an actual result. So then you can look at the baseline and your target against your actual result. And in your annual reports, you will be able to describe the achievement of the outcome. And that is very important, to be able to describe clearly that you did these activities, you started from this baseline, and this is where you are today. And then it enables you for your future strategic planning sessions to be able to say, based on what we did last year, this is how we're going to modify our plan. So through going back to my, either looking at me wanting to do a marathon, which by the way, I don't think I will, but if I wanted to do a marathon, certainly the end result is very clear. Here's another example for you where a strategic outcome might be improved health and mobility to increase life expectancy and quality of life. So as you can see, improved health is one of those fuzzy words, but oftentimes strategic outcomes, they are at this point a little bit more fuzzy. So it could be increased health, but improved health allows us to be able to create intermediate and direct outcomes that are very clear and concise. In this case, the intermediate outcome is decreased weight, reduced blood pressure, and cholesterol. So those are things we know that we can measure. We know they're proxies for improved health, and we know they're proxies for increased life expectancy. Maybe the direct thing that I need to do is to reduce bad consumption of bad foods, or increase minutes exercising, reduce meals in restaurants, whatever that might look like. One way or the other, they're very clear and concise, and I know what the result looks like. The activities to be able to do this might be, cooking healthy, etc. So the idea is to have this very logical dot-to-dot framework where we can see how the activities are leveraged in the outputs. So we use activities to create outputs. Those outputs create outcomes for individuals or groups of individuals. There's medium-term outcomes that we're driving towards still. So we want to make a bigger change than what we're doing at the direct level. And then your organization will have something you're passionate about within that priority that is a stretch goal. And that's your long-term strategic outcome. And just kind of flying back the other way, it also makes it easier for your organization staff to see, okay, why am I here? It's very much the janitor to the moon concept. How am I helping to be able to create success for my organization, regardless of where I am in the organization? And then lastly, this template is provided for you so that you could maybe do your own strategic planning workshop. This template has some helpful kind of indicators for you, where we have the strategic outcomes bring about a change to an attribute for a target group. So it's very generic right now for you, but I encourage you to be able to try and fill out these boxes so that you can see the dot-to-dot connection from the activities that you're doing, the resources that you're spending, against the types of results that you wish to achieve. I am starting to see that organization strategic plans are starting to leverage more a logical framework and less a contextual word-based framework, because these ones make it much easier for the full organization to understand how they're achieving success. And I think with that, I would like to offer that questions or feedback or comments. I very much would love to hear from you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, we have lots of great questions coming in. So I'd like to start with one that's come up from a few different people. We're obviously seeing increasingly rapid changes in the world today. Is it still feasible to work with a 5-year plan, or is it better to work on more like a 3-year plan? What are your thoughts on that?
I love that question. That is actually a fantastic question, and thank you for all of you that brought that question up. As an Army general once said, no plan survives contact with the enemy. And Churchill also said that plans are of little importance, but planning is essential. So I think that your question that, how do we interact with the fact that the world is changing at such a fast pace? And this concept that as soon as you seem to publish or print on a plan, it's changed. And I think the biggest area where I can offer some guidance is that the strategic plan is a guidance tool. So the areas of focus that I like to have is on your vision, that's clear. Your mission, who you are, that's clear. How you interact is clear. Who you're helping is super clear. And how you're going to help them is clear in terms of the resources that you have to help. As things change in the environment, absolutely, some of your activities will have to be modified in order to be effective. So the most important area of strategic planning is really understanding who you are, why you exist, and who you're doing it for. And then definitely make sure that the behaviors support an end vision statement. I hope that answers the question.
That's great. I also just want to give you a comment here that I think probably resonates for more than one person on this call. So this participant says, I'm happy to learn that it's not me that has struggled with the use of fuzzy words and has left me feeling confused about my organization's strategic plan and left me thinking that I'm not thinking strategically. Now I can address that clearly. So that's great.
Fantastic.
Okay, moving on. Can you talk a little bit about KPIs? Can you just maybe reiterate what that stands for and how those are part of the process?
Yeah, so KPIs, or key performance indicators, are those prioritized measures that you've chosen that will be an indicator for success. So in real words, because I get it that I used a whole lot of jargon there, in real words, it's your target. So if I say, for instance, I want to run a marathon, a KPI might be that one of the KPIs is going to be that 4-hour mark. And so it's not about achieving necessarily that KPI in week 1, but you want to be able to demonstrate that if you have a target key performance indicator, that you are moving towards that target. So that key performance indicator is something that maybe your board, your executive leverage to give an indicator that the entire organization is doing well, healthy, and is in alignment, without having to dive into a lot of detail and into the weeds of a whole lot of other data that you probably have available to you. I see in most organizations that maybe they only have about 5 KPIs that they're managing, which are indicators or proxies for the success of the organization. I hope that answered that question.
Wonderful. And another question that's been coming up from a few different people, approximately how long does the strategic planning process normally take?
You know what? That's a really great question as well, because I have worked with First Nations where they like to really be inclusive with the membership and the community and their stakeholders, and they very much leverage a year cycle where they look at the different seasons and how the different seasons impact them. And then I've worked with other organizations where literally they hunker down in one day, and they get the people in the room that are perceived to be the ones that are going to be able to participate and enhance that plan from all levels of the organization, and workshop out how to enhance their strategic plan. I think the best kind of timeline would be over a couple of few months, simply to do the workshopping around what you think that the organization should focus on, have time to be able to reflect on that, have time to be able to communicate that to other members that were not involved with the workshop, to include their feedback, to refresh what was there, and to be able to develop something that is going to be a good guide for the organization moving forward.
That's great. And on that note, Ashley, who should be involved typically? Is it board and staff, just the board? What are your thoughts?
So, yeah, my thoughts are definitely, I love to include staff. So certainly board. It doesn't necessarily have to be an entire board. It could be members to a committee that is representative of a couple of people from the board, a few people from management, some staff that are, very much, I like the idea of having whomever is actually actively participating with the outside, so that whoever's the audience, whatever is the end service offering. It's also important to have reflection of, certainly from an HR point of view, a marketing point of view, the financial point of view, strategic point of view. So that could be a varied mix, but I do think it's very important to include people from not only the board, but also staff.
And earlier in the presentation, when you were talking about audience, were you meaning the audience should be stakeholders like funders, or would it be more of beneficiaries to the program? And are staff and volunteers ever a part of the audience of the plan?
Excellent question. Thank you for bringing that one up. The audience is actually, you should be doing your audience exploration as it relates to the beneficiaries of your program. That should be an effort to be able to understand. You should put some effort around understanding who they are, what do they need. You should definitely be looking at those supporters or funders. Who are they and what do they need? And volunteers, because they definitely make sure that your organization runs, and without volunteers, potentially you are going to be unable to satisfy the need of your beneficiary. So again, you put that same effort around looking at who are they and what do they need. And they might be used in different ways. So for instance, you want to make sure your volunteers, the priority around volunteers might be increasing the number of volunteers, might be increasing training opportunities for volunteers to effectively deliver supports and services. So there's different types of priorities for them than there will be for your beneficiaries. But it is important to include the different types of key target groups. That's why I call them target groups as opposed to just beneficiaries.
Excellent. I think that explains it quite a bit more. Now, moving on to some of the larger organizations that might have a multitude of different departments. Does this process drill down to the department level? Would there be departmental strategic plans that relate back to the overarching organizational strategic plan?
Oh, another great question. So again, let's come back to the idea that the strategic plan is a guidance tool. So this is the big vision that keeps everybody understanding this is who we are, this is why we exist, this is how we deliver services. This guidance tool will start to reference activities or strategies that will need to be delivered by different departments. I prefer to see strategic plans that are not siloed. So what I mean by that is that there's a priority around finances, there's a priority around HR. I'd rather see it be a little more overarching because you will get better results if you have a much more integrated process. And then what the department should be doing is taking that strategic plan, working with their group to better understand how they support these strategies, how they support the achievement of those outcomes, and specifically outline what I would call a departmental plan. Departmental plans should be a revolving year, probably 1 year outlook of quite detail of what you plan to do and some targets around that, with maybe up to a 2-3 year cycle around vision towards achieving what is lined up to the medium-term, intermediate outcome. So I wouldn't say that they need to have a strategic plan. I would say they need to have a departmental plan that lines up to the strategy.
Good stuff. And I think we have time for just one last question. Do you have advice for a leader who might be new to an organization and getting ready to start this strategic planning process?
Again, remember from right in the beginning, I said that it is different for every organization. The people that are involved have to be right for your organization. The best way to do strategic planning is with an open, honest, and free ability to talk about the opportunities and the challenge organization is facing. I think I would start with very much understanding and refreshing everybody's memory on what that vision, mission, and values are. And from that, you will find that the priorities will start to surface. Oftentimes, people will do a current state and then a kind of how we would get to that future state. And that will actually expose what are the types of priorities that organization might be interested in focusing in on.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Ashley. This has been a great presentation. We're so happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much.
Just before we sign off, I want to remind all of our audience today that we are going to follow up with you by email with the webinar recording and the slide deck. So watch for that tomorrow morning in your inbox. We're also going to include a link to a short survey. If you can take a moment to fill that out, that helps us with our future webinar planning. You'll have an opportunity there to also let us know if there's other topics you'd like to see covered in a future session. And our second webinar in this series for executives is coming up on April 5th. We're going to be discussing how to read financial statements, and we're going to send registration information for that in the email tomorrow as well. So we hope to see you at that session also. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.